interested if there's so many teachers from so many different countries about the language barrier.
Yes, there's a language barrier, you know, the younger kids, one of the school's goals is to teach English. The kids do learn some English. In addition, in fact, the kids are all polylingual because they have to speak whatever their native dialect is, but then they also should know the main languages of the country, which are Pashto and Dari. They also learn Arabic because they have to have some Islamic education as well. Then they also learn English because that's an international language. So the younger kids especially speak some English. And then the teachers try their best to learn Dari, and certainly in the time that I was there, I picked up a few useful phrases of Dari, and I studied a little before I went. So I learned things like "Bisyor khub," which means very good, even though it doesn't sound like it.
Do you know how to say "you must practice more"?
I didn't learn how to say that, but I did. I'm a horn player, so I learned how to say "breathe, breathe, nafaz, nafaz." So, you know, you learn. A good thing about music teaching is that music is very physical, and so a lot of stuff can be done simply by demonstrating and having your students imitate you. So I did a lot of that, and you learn to find ways. I mean, as I said, I've traveled a lot. I've been in a lot of places, you find ways to communicate with your music and with your, you know, with whatever you have available, so I would say that's a barrier, but probably not the most significant barrier. The cultural barriers are actually higher than the language barriers sometimes.
So along those lines, cultural barriers, can we step outside the school for a second, and let me ask you, in the 10 days you were there, when you weren't teaching in the school, what did you do, and what really stuck out to you? What was interesting?
Yeah. Kabul was an interesting city. There are a couple things that were striking. Some things I expected and some I didn't. I mean, it's a big third world city, and if you've ever been to any third world city, be it, you know, somewhere in Latin America or in you know, in Asia or wherever, you know, there's it can be very vibrant and very chaotic. And Kabul has an aspect of that. There was, you know, the traffic was abominable. There's no highways through the city. So I actually stayed in a place that was probably not more than a mile or two from the school, but we had to allow an hour to commute by car. There was also a bad snowstorm the second day I arrived there, which completely paralyzed the city. So, you know, there's sort of this big, you know, there is this sort of crowded city vibe, you know, tons of people everywhere, tons of cars everywhere, no traffic lights, you know, free-for-alls in the street. There are obviously some differences with Kabul because everything is, the view from the street can be a little bit drab because so many things are behind blast walls from the years of warfare. So you don't see as many structures. You see just concrete walls. The roads have been sort of hemmed in. And that's a little sad. There's sort of always this consciousness that war could return to Kabul at any time.
Did you feel safe while you were there?
I felt totally safe. But there are a number of reasons for that. I mean, one is that, you know, the fact of the matter is day-to-day life in Kabul, it goes on as life does, and, you know, they do have bombings, but they're rare. You know, they're not daily, and there's not much you can do. The only time I felt just a little bit nervous, actually, is I got stuck behind a military convoy, and that was interesting because, of course, that would be a target if somebody was going to target us for a bombing. But also, the convoy itself is equipped with weapons, and those weapons are trained on people in traffic. So you actually have the experience of having a tank aimed directly at you when you're in traffic, which can be disconcerting.
Wow.
But that said, you know, everything that takes place in Kabul, and there's a lot going on there right now in terms of education and development, it takes place underneath this security that's provided by the military that's there. So it's a necessary evil, you have to say. But the other reason that I felt fairly safe is that, frankly, Afghanistan is filled with all kinds of ethnicities, and I could pass for Afghani, especially wearing the right clothes. There's not enough to distinguish me from the other ethnicities there. So I didn't stand out as an American. I had a friend there who was living there teaching, and he was like 6'3" and lanky and blonde and blue-eyed, and I think he stuck out a lot more. But for me, I felt like I could blend into a crowd fairly easily.